And what I'm gonna
Yeah, go ahead.
turn my awful picture off. I don't think it comes in the recording, but
Oh, yeah, probably won't. Okay, cool. Okay. Well, good evening. We're going to talk about the medicine wheel tonight and what it's really about patterns, and it could be about traumatic patterns, but the way that the indigenous American people look at it, the First Nation people, is they call them addictions, partly because if you're stuck in a particular quadrant, like mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual, that would be, if you're kind of on this loop in one of the quadrants, that's considered an addiction from this perspective. So we'll talk about what those look like and then how to use the wheel to break the addiction or to transform the pattern. Okay, what am I looking for? I want to share my screen, and so honestly, this is, I think, one of the most, oops, I forgot the date today. One of the most exciting topics. I think this is a wonderful application of the medicine wheel, is what I'm trying to say. It's a very useful, applicable way of addressing emotional patterns, limiting beliefs, and well, patterns where we feel like we're stuck in an area, and addictive patterns. Okay, so this quote is on here from Hemias Storm, but I want to actually read you something about the way of touching. I'm going to read you a passage like that, a short passage here. The touching. To touch and feel is to experience. This is from, this is from Seven Arrows by Hemias Storm. To touch and feel is to experience. Many people live out their entire lives without ever really touching or being touched by anything. These people live within a world of mind and imagination that may move them sometimes to joy, tears, and happiness, or sorrow, but these people never really touch. They do not live and become one with life. The sun dancer believes that each person is a unique and living medicine wheel, powerful beyond imagination, that has been limited and placed upon this earth to touch, experience, and learn. The six grandfathers taught me that each man, woman, and child at one time was a living power that existed somewhere in time and space. These powers were without form, but they were aware. They were alive. Each power possessed boundless energy and beauty. These living medicine wheels were capable of nearly anything. They were beautiful and perfect in all ways except one. They had no understanding of limitation, no experience of substance. These beings were total energy of the mind, without body or heart. They were placed upon this earth that they might learn the things of the heart through touching. According to the teachers, there is only one thing that all people possess equally. This is their loneliness. No two people on the face of the earth are alike in any one thing except for their loneliness. This is the cause of our growing, but it is also the cause of our wars. Love, hate, greed, and generosity are all rooted within our loneliness, in our desire to be needed and loved. The only way that we overcome our loneliness is through touching. It is only in this way that we can learn to be total beings. God is a presence of the total. Hey mea vihio, sorry, that's my bad pronunciation. Hey mea vihio, the breath of wisdom, and Maya he yun, total understanding, are but two of the words in the Cheyenne language which express wholeness. So in the medicine wheel tradition, an addictive pattern is like a loop, which you keep repeating, and it keeps you stuck in a particular quadrant or lodge in the wheel. When I learned this, like, let's say 25 plus years ago, this was like really revolutionary to me. I don't think I think now in modern society, we, you know, in contemporary society, we have a better understanding of traumatic patterns and addictive patterns, and we see them perhaps as a loop or a repeating of a particular behavior or something. But I mean, I wasn't aware of that until I learned the medicine wheel. I wasn't aware of that. And I think there's a greater and greater awareness, or a greater and greater similarity maybe, or understanding of, like I say, addictive patterns, traumatic patterns, and how we kind of repeat them. You know, we can be stuck in this groove, you know, repeating this cycle over and over again as we're trying to learn it and work with it or transform it. Hold on, I'm going to, this is unusual. Anyway, we'll move on from this slide. But this is about this looping like type pattern, like repeating a behavior over and over again that keeps you stuck in a particular, let's say, quadrant of the wheel, you know, either mind, body, emotions, or spirit. So an intellectual, we'll go clockwise from the east, which is the way we work the medicine wheel. An addiction in the intellectual quadrant might look like a desperate need to know, like always needing to know the answer. Maybe even keep questioning, but really without listening or without applying, asking, you know, not, maybe really better to say, like having knowledge, but not applying it. You know, in the medicine wheel tradition, you would have the question, but then, you know, take the information through the whole wheel. You know, you would work with it and you'd embrace it. And so I'm just kind of giving you a feel for what like an intellectual addiction might look like. I think this is kind of my opinion, but from the indigenous American perspective, the Western world, or, you know, our American way of life, we would be considered to have an intellectual addiction, because we really need to know and to grasp everything. And I know if you were to go to a native elder, you'd need to sit and listen and apply and try to apprehend the wisdom without just asking a bunch of questions. So there was more of an emphasis on like listening, taking it in, and that, you know, different than our like American or Western educational system, which is really emphasizes asking questions. So that's just a cultural, I mean, not just, but it's a cultural difference. And I think there's some value in really looking at the way that, you know, really working on balance of these different quadrants. You know, that would be the goal, to have balance, you know, to still ask questions and to learn and to have an active intellect, but to have it balanced with the body and the emotions and the spirit. So when you work with an addictive pattern, and again, addiction from the Lakota point of view or the medicine wheel point of view is just, you're on a you have a behavior pattern and it's like stuck there. It's not doing the whole wheel. It's like stuck in a quadrant or in a lodge and kind of just repeating it over and over again. So, you know, one of the, I guess, worldviews of the medicine wheel is that the goal is to really travel through the wheel to balance intellect, body, emotions, and spirit, and to have all these different parts as part of a very rich and well-rounded life. Okay, so to work with an addictive pattern, we work within each quadrant. And so in this one, my men's lodge is missing here because it was hard to fit all the words in. But so you go just like in the medicine wheel, when we pray the medicine wheel and we go from the east and we go clockwise. that's how you work with an addictive pattern. You start in the east and you go clockwise. So, you know, each addictive pattern for the quadrants of the intellect, body, emotions, and spirit, you'll have four steps, but you might repeat them. So with an intellectual pattern, the way you would work with it or transform it is you still ask your question or pose your question, travel on the path of inquiry, like maybe how do I change this pattern? You make peace with the pattern in the Peace Chief's Lodge. So you travel through the lodges, you gather energy, and then you take a vow to, you would take a vow to change it or to break the pattern or whatever. And you probably keep doing this process until you were able to move past that pattern. I mean, that's how I've done it when I've used this process. I've been exploring the idea of what this looks like. I mean, this is this addiction in the intellectual quadrant. I've kind of, until recently, teaching art in the third eye, I didn't really realize how much we want to stay in our left brains as Westerners and not really go into the connective, quiet, relationship-oriented part of the right brain, which would be in the medicine wheel, the emotional lodge. And so as I've been working on this class for you guys, I have realized, oh, this is actually an area where I'd like to do, you know what I mean? I'd like to do further exploration into this mental addiction because I'm finding myself having a hard time. You know, most of my work as a teacher is in this quadrant. And I even after doing the medicine wheel for, almost 30 years now, I still find it hard to balance it with these other quadrants because like many people in American culture, I do want to know and I want to learn, and I have an active mind and intellect. And again, that's not a bad thing in and of itself, but the goal of the medicine wheel is to have balance between these and to be able to gather energy from each of the quadrants and each of the lodges. So we'll go through it, and then if you have any questions, we can talk about this at the end. So just know that in each quadrant, so intellect, body, emotions, and spirit, you're going to go to work with the pattern. You're going to go east, south, west, north, just like you would go through the wheel. You're going to go clockwise through the wheel. Okay. So in the body, I'll move the thing over here. In the Lakota tradition, a body addiction, the body is considered innocent. And so this is like radically different from a Christian-based tradition where the body is considered sinful and guilty, and the bodies of, in a Christian tradition and most Western traditions that I know of, the body is the guilty, right? We blame the body, we blame desire, we blame temptation, we blame the body for the addiction and for, these, whatever sinful qualities. Again, different in the Lakota tradition, the body is innocent. And I think this to me is a very powerful concept or reframing, or like, I choose to believe that the body, rather than believe what the Christians believe, that the body is sinful, I choose to embrace the idea that the body is innocent. That's a big paradigm shift if you think about how, if the body's innocent, like what that could possibly mean for you. So when you work with a physical addiction, could be alcoholism, drug addiction. It's been a long time since I have drunk alcohol with more frequency. Early on, I may have worked with this for alcohol. I wouldn't ever say I was alcoholic, but I had a point where alcohol was playing too dominant of a role in my life. So I may have worked with it early on in terms of alcohol, but I know I've worked with it as with sugar because I've had some times in my life where my sugar addiction was so bad that I was really numbed out before I got a divorce from Ray. I kind of had this inkling that I needed to, this was a long time ago in maybe 2010, December of 2010, I had this kind of voice in my head that was like, I should explore the idea of getting a divorce. And, you know, it wasn't like you need to get a divorce. It was more like, maybe you should look into this feeling. And as a result of pursuing that idea, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm so addicted to sugar. I was so addicted to sugar at that time, partly because I had breastfeeding Gemma. So I was ravenously hungry, but also my life was so painful at that time that I was really using sugar to numb me out. And so I'm telling you this story because this is what I learned from doing this process with the medicine wheel, is like I realized how addicted to sugar I was and how much, you know, sugar is a painkiller that's been used. The Egyptians used honey and other forms of sugar for painkilling, and how numb I was. And so I think this is a powerful process if you want to break, you know, we're most familiar perhaps with physical addictions, but this is a powerful way to work with, to break a physical addiction or transform a physical addiction. So again, you go from east, you know, start in the east, you go clockwise. So first of all, in this way of working with the wheel, you make peace with the addictive and you make peace with the addiction and the substance that you're addicted. You make peace with the fact that you're addicted to a substance. Then instead of waging war against your body, right, which is often the way we think about addictions, you wage war against the substance itself. So really, again, with the mindset that the body is innocent and the substance is really the problem, or, you know, you wage war against the substance. And then you tell your story. So again, with this, that's kind of why I'm telling you what I realized using this process with the sugar addiction was like how numb I was and what was the story? How did I get here, right? When you go to the Mediums and Singers Lodge, usually you're taking a history, you're telling a story. So you're going back into the past and you're looking at, well, what was the story? How did I get here? Why is this the case? And you're kind of unveiling it for yourself. And then you go and gather energy. Before you move forward, you gather energy because the more energy you gather, the easier it is to overcome the pattern. So I'll just make a note of it. In every lodge, you need to, in every quadrant for every addiction, you need to go into the children's fire. You always gather energy at some point in this process. But in the physical lodge, in the physical quadrant, excuse me, you gather energy last, and then that gives you the energy, hopefully, so that you're bigger than the addiction and you can break through it. But I would say with my experience with this, you would maybe go through this several times, you know, maybe every day, right? Maybe every day while you're working on not, you know, breaking your sugar addiction, you might make peace in the morning, you know, vow to wage war against the substance, like remove it from your house, whatever that would entail, you know, like have a system so that you were not eating sugar. You would tell your story, journal about your story, about your insights, about how you're feeling, and then again, gather energy. And we'll talk, after I show you all these, we'll talk about what gathering energy, how you do that, or what ways, we'll brainstorm some ways to do that. Oh, and the other thing that I found, because this one's the one I'm most familiar with, sometimes, well, I have experimented with this in these patterns, in these addictive patterns in the wheel. Sometimes, but especially with the physical one, I have found as I'm working with this, that the physical addiction is hiding an addiction in another quadrant. So like I was telling you about my marriage, after I started to break the sugar addiction, I realized I was really having maybe a different pattern in the emotional quadrant. So once I dealt with the physical addiction, it became clear that there was a real problem going on in the but I didn't know that when I started the journey of like, maybe I should look at what's going on in my marriage. I really didn't know that. And then I had to get rid of the sugar in order to not be so numbed out that I could actually see and feel what was happening in my marriage. So there's kind of layers, like think about working with this, with peeling away the layers. Okay, so an emotional addiction, one of the terms for an emotional addiction would be called marriage basket syndrome. And that's where, where one is like pining away for a significant other such that they're not really working or developing themselves or anything else. They're just focused on getting in a relationship, being in a relationship. But there are other emotional addictions. I think if you have emotional pattern, even fear or I think any emotion where you find yourself constantly where it's, there's a healthy time for fear, right? If you're, out in the road and, cars coming or whatever, there's a healthy fear. And then there's like the emotions where you're just on this loop because it's been grooved into you. You're afraid of something. This would be, I would use the emotional quadrant for this. And, I'll say after my marriage, after my divorce, I did work with this emotional quadrant of the wheel, because, when I was dating again after my divorce, I found that I kept repeating what I would call the anxious avoidant relationship. I'm anxious I read a book called Attached and realized that I had an anxious attachment style, and I kept dating these men with an avoidant attachment style, and it's a very addictive, this is an incredibly addictive relationship pattern because you get involved, you're like super in love with the person, you've fallen head over heels, and as the anxious person, you're trying to hold on to them to get secure attachment, and they're basically they don't want, they want to push you away because they're not into they don't want the intimacy. They're kind of pushing you away. And what happens is it makes the anxious person more anxious and the avoidant person more avoidant, and they both go deeper and deeper into that emotional pattern until either the relationship falls apart because there's more and more grasping on the part of the anxious person and more pushing away on the part of the avoidant person. But it's definitely damaging to the anxious person's self-esteem and self-worth. So anyway, this book is about that. It's really for anxious attached people and how they can get in a securely attached relationship. But so this would be one. I'm just giving you kind of some examples of like how you might visualize and work with these in the emotional quadrant. You would gather energy first. So before you work with the emotions, you gather energy. So you're not stuck in, let's say, the low self-worth, or you're not stuck in the fear. You gather energy first. So I don't know if you've ever like gone to exercise class or dance class or taken a hike or whatever. You were feeling bad when you started and then you felt fantastic after. That's kind of, that's when you gather energy, especially through exercise and the emotions, you can change that emotional pattern. Anyway, so transforming an emotional addiction, you would gather energy first, then tell your story related to the pattern, then sit in silence or be in silence. Maybe you can meditate or, right, you're going to give some silent and reflective time. And then you say yes to God, whatever, yes to changing the pattern or yes to whatever the new opportunity is. And then again, most of these things, it's not a one and done thing. Like, if you've ever worked with an addiction, and we all have our different ways of having these addictive patterns, right? So if you ever worked with one, you know that it's, you know, to change a behavior, you know, takes X, however, you know, I've heard different numbers, you know, 21 days or 40 some odd days or whatever it is, right? You gotta change the pattern. And then, you know, you really want to change the pattern and not have it be so that that you're like going back to it right after, you know what I mean? Get out of it for a month or two and then you're right back at it, right? You really want to shift the pattern. And so part of this really is learning about yourself through this process. So a spiritual addiction, one of the spiritual addictions in the native tradition could be self-righteousness, like thinking that you're right and everyone's wrong, like thinking, I mean, this is common in Christianity. This is one reason I left Christian Science. There was I was at like a Sunday service and they were saying you had to be a Christian Scientist and you couldn't be, you know, nobody else understood God except Christian Science. And I was just so irritated that I was like, I'm not gonna play this game anymore. So that would be considered a spiritual addiction, like thinking that your way of accessing God or spirit is the only way to access God or spirit. And the saying that I've heard related to this is, my truth is wider than your truth. So that would be considered a spiritual addiction in the Lakota tradition. I also think, having worked with it, you know, worked with breaking addictions in this quadrant, I believe that self-worth patterns belong in the spiritual quadrant. Because, and this is mainly from like playing with this and seeing if is it an emotion or is it in my body, is it in my mind, you know. I think self-worth is in the spiritual, because I do think God and Great Spirit believe we are worthy of giving our gifts, and this is and if we don't give ourselves, or, you know, give or receive because of our self-worth issues, I think that's a spiritual pattern. That's my own 2 cents on that. But I think that's an area where, I mean, I've worked a lot trying to heal and shift self-worth issues. So I'm mainly adding that out of hoping that it's helpful. So in this one, you first go into the Dog Soldiers Lodge, where you take a vow to change. So let's say self-worth, like, you know, I vow to be worthy to give service and receive a good payment for the service I give. Okay, right? I take the vow, then I gather energy, right? You need the energy. Probably you need energy to hear God. So again, when I go on my hike in the morning, I hike and I pray the medicine wheel and I listen for answers for my day. And then you say yes to God. So you take your vow, gather energy, say yes to God, and then you do the work. Hunting and gathering, the Hunters and Gatherers Lodge, right? This quadrant, the spiritual in this tradition, is the quadrant, you know, the element is earth. This is where hunting and gathering is where you really do the work. So I think that's interesting, that hunting and gathering, you know, you're going to do the work to change. Like what does that entail? I mean, you know, you're going to give service, you're going to charge, you're going to change it, right? If that's your issue. I'm not saying that is, but like that means doing the work to change the pattern. Okay, so and then again, like most of them, you're probably going to repeat it a number of times to break through it. Okay, so this one doesn't really have to do with the emotions. I'm just showing an example. So in every, you know, no matter what addiction you have as far as intellect, body, emotions, and spirit, and even if you worked with these other lodges, you would still go through the children's fire. But I want to just talk about, if you don't mind unmuting, like what are some ways you can gather energy? I know for me, I usually exercise is one of the main ways I gather energy, because I'm physically gathering more energy. The medicine wheel prayer is a way that I gather energy. Do you have some thoughts on that, Tess?
I believe that I gather energy by movement, whether
Movement.
that is movement in my mind, movement in my body, movement in my emotions,
Okay.
movement in my spirit. I gather
Okay.
energy through my visual processing.
Okay.
That's how I touch the world.
Okay. Cool. I'm glad you're sharing some different ones because yeah, I mean, I'm realizing that I've got I had a a solar return reading this year for my birthday, and I've got mooning in Taurus. So she was like, you really need to. I was thinking about my walk in prayer. I was like, she's
Mhm.
like, you really need movement. And she's like, you could listen to a book on tape or what, like Audible while you're walking or whatever. And I mean, sometimes I do that, but usually I walk and I pray. So that's how but I think it is different. Gathering energy is different for different people. I think you could, read inspirational books or,
I make
yeah,
things. I will
make things.
like to be near water.
Oh, yeah.
I will like to involve music, dancing,
Oh,
lifts me
yeah.
up.
Yeah.
People lift me up. Certain people. I was given the gift of seeing the energy of two different men and what I was attracted to. One
Oh,
was a great dancer, and he needed some help with his body presence. He would swoop in, and it was really jarring because
oh,
it's like you're in my space. And then he
uh-huh.
wanted to swing dance, and I was telling him I have a knee injury, so I don't want to dance that way. And he was a good dancer, very good dancer, like a steamroller. And this other guy was across the room, and he looked like a Gnostic. He had long hair and a long beard and a long mustache, a little on the shaggy side, right?
Yeah.
But he had some long shorts on, a top, button up top with some sandals. He looked, very much the what you might imagine a hippie to look like, or I thought of him as a Gnostic. Well, I
Yeah.
kept looking at him and smiling, and he was looking at me and smiling, and he kept bowing to me. He put his hands in a prayer position and bowed to me
Wow.
many times. And I could just the stark contrast between this man who was well coiffed and had a nice haircut and looked like he was probably a software engineer, or he was a man of means. He made money. You could tell
Wow.
by the way he dressed and his shoes, and very confident and a very good dancer. And I was so attracted to. I mean, I like love a great dancer, but I
Yeah.
was so attracted to the man who was the mystic. And
Interesting.
I did have a little fantasy. I was like, I wonder what he looks like underneath, like if he trimmed up. And I said, oh, I bet he sold a company for a couple million, $50 million, and he's just wandering around and he looks all shagadoo. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I got a really interesting vibe from him, and people were
That's,
like, Why didn't you go up and talk to him?" And I just felt shy. But the
oh,
point is,
yeah.
that is how I gather energy.
Interesting. That's cool. Yeah. That's a
Is
great,
is
yeah.
is my observation of the human condition.
That's cool. Yeah. I love that. I mean, the movement, the dancing, the observation. I love all of that. That's a great way to gather energy. And a couple of ones that I thought of while you were talking was sometimes sleep, like last year I gave up coffee because I was having such bad anxiety that I gave up coffee, and I never thought I would give up coffee. But after that, in order to gather enough energy, I had to sleep a lot more. So, sleep is one way to gather energy. And I mean, there's a lot of ways, but that's one where we often don't get enough sleep. Ceremony, we don't have a lot of ceremony. I mean, unless you're part of a spiritual tradition, like if you were Episcopalian or Catholic or whatever, right? You could go to mass. That would be a way to gather energy, but we don't have a lot of ceremonial opportunities, not the way the natives have, where you would there are ways to do healing with ceremony in the native tradition that we just don't have a lot of opportunity for. Where your idea about dancing brought that to my mind, like where you might go dance and set the tone of the energy for several days, and then, you know, work through a healing or something with a ceremonial, you know, a ceremonial way to do it. So do you have other one? I mean, those are ones that came to me while you were talking. Like, I'd like to do more of that, honestly. I'd like to do more healing ceremony. I just, you know, we don't really, you know, it's kind of like building something out of nothing because we don't have a lot of that in the.
I saw this at the fair. It was a drinking bowl, and they've used them in all kinds of traditions. These were wood. Yeah, it's you know, it was a ceremonial bowl, and they, I mean, they still make them.
Yeah.
But you know, you would pour in it and you pass it around to everyone at the table, and they drink from it. Of course, now we're all germophobic and be like, "Oh my God,
Oh, neat.
I might get some." But I saw some wood ones, and I thought, "Oh wow, I want to start that tradition." It
That's
may
cool.
be me drinking here, but
Yeah.
when I do, I want to, you know, incorporate some more ceremony. Like I do my moon wheel, but I think during the full moon, you know, or maybe the evenings of the various moon stages,
Yeah.
um, pouring a sacred beverage and doing my singing bowls and aligning my
Wow.
chakras and having some intention
Yeah.
um, in terms of ceremony.
Wow. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna have to do.
Okay. That's cool. That's a great idea. I know. I'm thinking about how, you know, these different, it's probably maybe gathering energy is very specific to the quadrant, you know, or to the situation, you know, like with my example about coffee, you know, I really needed sleep there, and I changed some foods. You know, I gathered energy in terms of eating foods that were meant to heal my adrenals and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that would be one. And then in the intellect, though, I'm thinking I've been doing transcendental meditation this year. One of the things that I find that calms that intellectual is for me to do transcendental meditation. So that might be one for the intellect. And there's, you know, there's different ways of get right. You know, prayer might be a way to gather energy for the spiritual. You know, there's different ways, and they'll, you know, I don't know. I'm just thinking like we talked about different ways of movement, different ways of gathering energy, different elements, right? Water could be an element, fire could be an element, you know, earth, you know, any of those. The moon, you gather energy from the moon. That's excellent. And the sun, you know, the seasons, we gather energy from the seasons too.
Yes, yes.
Cool. Okay.
Oh, I love this.
Oh, I mean, I just wanted to come up with some ideas because there's more than one way. I mean, exercise is my go-to, but it's not the only way. You know, sometimes if we're dealing with emotional stuff, we need to take a bath, or we need to go to the creek or go to the ocean, or what, you know, like it
Yeah,
really
water.
really depends. Yeah.
And even if it's just drinking water, I do find that it's just there's something magical about water. But
Yeah.
I'm like writing,
Drinking water. Yeah.
yeah, and I do think making some kind of noise. I have a affinity to the bells, to the singing bowls, to plucking guitar strings, to
Oh.
a hangpan, the you know the drums. Although I don't know why I don't enjoy percussion more. I today like listening to or yesterday this weekend listening to the Celtic drum or the Scottish drums.
Yeah.
That gets your blood going, and I thought
Oh yeah,
I
that's a
need
good
to
one. The
play
sound, the drums, the
music
singing.
here and just
Yeah.
pound on the drums while I'm listening to them to teach myself, you know, the rhythm. But
Yeah. Wow.
singing, do you sing?
I do. I actually, that is a good way. I to myself, I'm not a great singer, but I will sing. When I sing on my own, it really does fill me with energy. So,
It's a lie. Whoever
yeah.
told you that you couldn't sing, that was a lie.
Oh,
Your
okay.
pipes might need to be tuned. You
Okay.
may need some instruction on how to get your vocal cords to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
but it's a lie someone told you that you can't sing. It's like the same reason why I don't, learn French. It's a lie.
Yeah.
When
Okay.
someone isn't good at language.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes. I used to sing, in Waldorf, part of our curriculum was singing. I taught first and second grade, and a lot of the like for snack, we would sing a little blessing for our food, and for transitions, we would sing, maybe to go outside or, to start the day and end the day. And honestly, it was so great. I loved singing. I got to sing like all these different times of the day with the kids. It's a really fantastic way to gather energy singing. I mean, like you said, all these things, making drumming, singing, dancing, singing bowls, sound, crystal sound bowls, I think is what you're, one of the things you're referring to. Okay, these are great. Yeah, so lots of ways to gather energy to shift you. I think you mentioned writing, doing art, visual art.
Yeah.
Any of
Yeah.
the arts is a good way to gather energy because you're working with, when you work with visual art and like textures and colors, that shifts your emotions. Any of the arts, though, it could be performing, it could be, again, singing, dancing, music, it could be acting or improv or visual art. Any of the arts or creativity is definitely a great way to gather energy. Okay, cool. I love your ideas, Tess. Thank you. Your perspective and ideas. Okay, so here we are. I'm showing this again just to hopefully, I mean, I don't know where you're at with this, but I want you, this group that's been taking the medicine wheel class to feel comfortable with exploring praying the wheel. If you feel like praying the wheel is a very wonderful practice. So I've been I've been trying to like lay the groundwork. If you guys are wanting to, if you've been experimenting, that would be great. Or to keep to embrace the idea of praying the wheel for yourself. I'm gonna set my thing up, so I'll pray. Oh, is there anything you would like me to pray for this evening?
I want to have some clarity around character and action interests. Like, what am I going to take action on?
Okay.
Pray for listening to my heart and really hearing it. I have been, but there's a big decision that's looming on the horizon.
Okay.
And I pray for the clarity that it reveals itself in a way that it's very clear.
Okay.
It fills my heart with intention, purpose, and action.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So you want, okay. You want, let me rephrase, let me make sure I have it clear. You want clarity on, there's a big decision looming. You want to have clarity and have the energy to take, you want it to resonate with you, feel harmonious, and you want to take action.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Grandmother Earth, Grandfather Sky, power of the four directions, all of our ancestors, we send a voice. Grandmother, grandfather, please connect us and, wrap us in light as we pray, God, Great Spirit. We are asking you this evening to help us to have clarity in terms of the big decisions or the big decision that is coming, and the energy and attunement, the harmony to take action. We are at peace, God, Great Spirit, with this decision. We are at peace with the process of gathering clarity. We're at peace with wanting to be in harmony and to have our heart filled and to be in alignment with intention, purpose, and action. Help us to fight to take action that is best for us. Help us fight to make the right actions and take the right actions. Grandmother, grandfather, with big decisions, God, Great Spirit, it is often hard to know or have the clarity. Sometimes we are of two minds or of several minds on a situation, or we have an inner conflict that we are attempting to resolve that makes it hard for us to know what is right for us or what is the right decision to make. Please help Taz, and please help us to have that clarity and to make the big decisions and to have, clarity of purpose, clarity of heart, clarity of intention, and clarity of action. Thank you. Thank you, God, Great Spirit. Thank you for being there. Thank you for giving us prayer. Thank you for giving us each other. Thank you for helping us to hunt and gather energy. We will hunt and gather the energy to fill ourselves so that we can find clarity. We will hunt and gather the clarity. We will hunt and gather the attunement and the harmony. We will hunt and gather purpose, and we will hunt and gather action. Grandmother, grandfather, we take a vow to sit with this path of inquiry, this question, this decision, and allow the answer or the action to come up within us, to resonate within us, to gurgle up out of the depths or out of our soul, so that we can feel in harmony and alignment with this important and powerful decision for the sake of the children and the children's children, until the sun no longer sets and the moon no longer rises. Aho!